It's like, is it happening? Is it going to happen again? Are we all just going to get buried? You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's probably, I would say, the non-Christian view of it, because I think they do give the controllers too much credit. I mean, because what you see with the mud flood, it had to be like an earthquake that was like so massive that literally it was like liquefied the soil and buildings sunk, because like it doesn't. I mean, there could be another possibility,
Okay,
but I
that
mean, to
makes
me,
more sense. That makes more sense. When I think of mudflat, I think there's these huge mountains and it rained and then the mountains
mhm.
came towards me. But if you're saying that it got so hot that the earth kind of like the cement and floor melted kind of and it went
Well,
downward.
it's well, what they call it. There's a term called liquefaction, where it's like, can you imagine if you had like an aquarium and you had all the stuff at the bottom of it and you had like a little castle there and you shook it real violently until like the thing
Down.
started to lower its level. I mean, that's one belief. I mean, obviously, I guess we're in the realm of speculating, because I mean, hey, like they don't tell us what happened. I mean, even like I said, you can go to every basically old town near you and you find evidence of this, like the buildings that, weird things where like the windows are like at the ground level, or like they're midway down the ground, like the road comes up. There's so much evidence of it everywhere. It's funny, even like, so when we did Ancient Angels, we talk about the megaliths and stuff. So a megalith that was in the news recently was that guy Jimmy Corsetti, Bright Insight. He was mentioning the World Economic Forum was not letting them excavate Göbekli Tepe. Whatever, who cares? I mean, it's
Yes, I
underground.
saw that.
There's lots of stuff that are underground. I mean, like they excavated enough of it to find out there's megaliths under the ground. What I want to talk about is the stupid stuff that they say about that place. Oh, they buried their own temple complex. Oh, did they? And they made it level all around, right? Or maybe it's buried like everything else is around this whole realm. Like just even like the with the Moai statues in Easter Island. Like, guess what, guys? They got bodies. Okay, so how did they get buried like that? Like there's literally 20 feet under the ground. And then so like when you go to like a Christian guy like me, in the book of Revelation, I made a reel about this and obviously pissed off a lot of Christians who are looking for the rapture. I said, Jesus is warning cities or churches in the book of Revelation. They're the seven churches in at the chapters 2 and 3 are about these seven churches that are in Asia, all in like modern day Turkey. And Jesus is saying, repent, because this is about to happen. Judgment is coming, and if you don't get right with me, I'm going to come at you. Okay, so places like, okay, Sardis, Turkey is a really interesting one, where these churches are no longer exist. And not only do they not exist, but again, they have to excavate them, and they find pillars, columns that are 20 feet under the ground. And when they dig them up, they look partially melted. So there's evidence all around this place of that things that were once old. Isn't it funny too? Like Roman bathhouses. Oh, guess what? They were trying to build a subway or something, and
XG's listening. Go on.
they discovered a bathhouse under the ground, under the street. It's funny, they're always bathhouses. I mean, like that's like the Romans didn't build anything else. The point is, there's buildings under the ground. That, like literally, there's like a civilization that we built on top of. Like places like like was it in Sacramento, Seattle, Portland? They have underground sections. Atlanta, like these more primitive people than us decide we're going to dig way into the ground and build our stuff under the ground because it's so easy for us to do that. When we know if we don't do that because it's difficult, even though obviously I think everybody would want to have a basement if they could have one. But where I live, they claim the water table's too high because I live at sea level. I'm like live like right by the beach. We can't do that. Meanwhile, I was in Norfolk, Virginia, which is 7 feet above sea level. It floods every time there's a big storm, every time. Well, all the places right around the water, all are half basements. Well, that's weird. Did they want to do that
Oh,
because they would flood all the time? Nobody would build. I mean, like I said, these people were both able to build really nice buildings, but also really stupid because they built basements where it floods all the time. I mean, it makes no sense. Obviously, something really bad happened, and I mean, obviously, it's kind of anybody's best guess what happened. But I guess going back to my original point, I don't know that the controllers can do that. I think what you have after whatever happened, and maybe 1776 or whenever that that reset happened. I think the founded fathers were like, they found stuff. The Freemasons found Freemasonry.
The founded fathers. I like
And
that.
they found the Freemasonry and they took credit for everything. I said, the Freemasons built nothing. They took credit.
Freemasonry.
They took credit for everything. And so obviously, again, like, look at all the stuff we did. Look how smart we are. And so they took credit for it when literally they were like excavating places, taking ownership of buildings. And then like you go to DC, they have all these like Roman-esque buildings. And then you have what the Scottish Rite Freemasonry Temple looks exactly like those other ones. They just happened to get their hands on that one too. So I don't know. To me, I think that that's what the controllers really did is they must have survived this. Maybe they went underground. Maybe it's like that show Fallout. They were underground. They wrote out the reset. And then when they came back and they repopulated the place, they took credit for everything.
I'm with you, dude. Who was it? Johnny, was it you that I was talking to about that? It's like the Bears in Michigan that move into houses. They're like, this is my house.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, you didn't build it. You just moved right in. You know, you see that a lot with the Mayans. They did that as well, they think. And the Egyptians did that as well, where they just like, oh, we built this. And you're like, how'd you do it? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We had Analog on like I think 2-3 weeks ago, and he was talking about they just kept digging, and like one area they dig down so far, they found 4 different levels of civilization, and on the lowest level, it was like somewhere in America, I think it was, they found Chinese writing. So it's like, who knows how many times this stuff has happened? It's just crazy to me, but I love the melted. That it got so hot, melted. I find that super interesting.
Dude,
now,
can I just say really quick? The Roman Colosseum, they forgot what that was for a long time. They didn't even like. There was a period during the Middle Ages where they didn't even know what that was for. They thought it was built to like in honor of some gods or something. They used it as a source of like to recycle marble or and all the stones and stuff in it. They had no idea what that thing was for a long time, like a long time, dude. Which is that, think about that, for how long it was there, how long it took to be built and was used. And then for an even, a time even longer than that, they didn't even know what the hell it was, which is crazy.
No, I think that to me, that really exposed history to me was that again, we were taught like, well, how we know what was done this many thousand years ago, because obviously any kind of like paper would not survive that. So like, we don't really know how they did it. We obviously know they're advanced because the structures speak for themselves. They had to know mathematics and the knowledge of the stars to put the pyramids, line them up with Orion and all that stuff. But the Romans, again, if we have writings, the Bible's older than the Romans, right? Right? Okay, well, how did we ever lose technology from the Romans? Even they mentioned the Roman concrete is still better than the concrete we use today.
Whoa.
When, even like I said, if you think about it, the reason, and this actually makes sense, they don't know when Rome fell because Rome obviously conquered the whole modern world. Obviously, they were all around, Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and then Europe. And so like cities like London and Paris were Roman cities at some point. If you think of like, obviously Constantinople got moved. That was their capital. So when they built those cities, like how did they ever lose the know-how to do it? Because they moved all around. I mean, obviously, Romans ruled these places. They had prefects and they had people governors and different. So how did they forget anything? It's a lie. I mean, it's like, to me, that's really the only thing is it's a lie that something reset and everything. And there's people who know how these things were done. I mean, obviously the Vatican, everyone mentions they've got like 58 miles worth of like bookshelves, like 58 miles.
Unbelievable, dude.
Can you even imagine what's down there?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, there's so many weird things. And I think that to me, that's like, I mean, so that's when people like really try to question us, like, well, if I believe Jesus already came back and then the millennial reign happened, that 1,000 years of peace and prosperity, they would like, well, prove this to me, prove this to me, prove this to me. And I'm like, well, I can't prove anything to you because I'm the one I'm a history skeptic from the get-go. I'm relying on what the Bible said. If Jesus said he was coming back at a certain time, I believe that it happened. And I believe they would lie about it, and they wouldn't want me to be able to prove it to you. I mean, obviously, how would the devil deceive the nations if I could say, Jesus is right over there, right? So God has obviously allowed the devil to do this, probably for faith reasons, because if he was right over there and he was the king and he was making everyone do what he said, well, there'd be no faith in Jesus if you were forced to do everything he said, right? So I think, to me, it makes sense that, well, what would be the evidence? Well, I mean, they obviously had a time of peace and prosperity because the buildings are evident, right? Like, that's what I said, like, even like in America, the only way I would believe any of this stuff, I don't doubt that men created these buildings, but they would have needed a lot of time. They would need a lot of time, and it must have been a better part of life for them to be able to build beautiful things, make great art, great music, great sculptures. Like, so why don't we have that much time to do that now? When we actually have all the tools, the technology, we should make our lives easier, but it's really not easier, is it? It's almost like they've made us like free range slaves, and we can only go this far from our place. But guess what? We're real advanced. We got all this technology. When, again, you mentioned before, people are sicker, people are less happy. Isn't it funny? Like, even guys like me, I got into like endurance sports, and I got into like, working out a lot. Wouldn't I be happier if I was actually going and getting my food, like, and then I wouldn't have to exercise after work, and I would get food that didn't contain any rat feces? When the FDA says you can have this much rat feces in your food, when I could go get my own food, I could get my exercise, and I would have real fulfillment doing it versus being trapped in these certain boxes and obviously playing with these black mirrors all day long.
So